Hi everyone, it's Darlene. Welcome back for another card video. Today's card is a twisted pop-up card, and it is my family holiday photo card for this year. So here's how it works. Here's the front, and you open it up and it kind of twists and pops open. Now, I did not invent this card. There are plenty of tutorials out there that you can view, written and video, but I did modify the measurements to kind of optimize the sizing of it, and I'll walk you through that. So here's the stamp set Night in Bethlehem by Stampin' Up, and it has some matching dies. It's just a really beautiful set, I thought. And I'm going to start with my card base. So this is just a standard A2 size card, and I'm going to score this at 5.5 right in the middle of the 11 inches, and I'll fold it and use my bone folder. So this is just a standard size card. And then I'm going to take another piece. This is Night of Navy, by the way. And this is 3 inches by 8 inches. And I'm going to have all the measurements on the blog post. And I'm going to score it in half this way at 4 inches, and then 1.5 this way because that's 3 inches wide. So I'm going to do it in half both ways. I'm going to take it out of my scoreboard to make some pencil marks. I'm going to mark 2.5 inches from all 4 corners. And you're going to see me do a lot of pencil marks just because I don't really like to think about things and I want everything to be exact. So now you'll see that there's a reason for this black mark in my scoreboard. I wanted to be able to see the top and the bottom, and I'm going to use this line multiple times. I just took a Sharpie and I just drew down one of the grooves here, and I'm going to connect those 2.5 inch marks on the diagonal. So with those 4 score lines, I'm going to fold it back and forth, so in both directions on each one of these folds. This is actually going to be the pop-out mechanism that I'm going to connect to my card base. And the reason why I'm folding it on both sides is because I just want it to be really flexible and movable, so it's really easy to open up and close this card. To form the mechanism, you're going to fold inward the long score lines so that they go toward the center. So you're going to end up with this little house here, and you want to make sure that there isn't any overlap of the bottom, those long pieces. So you want to flatten it out on your craft mat and just press everything down at the top of this bone folder, just to make sure that there's no overlapping of those long pieces as they go toward the bottom. So you can see that that's it. That's all there is to the mechanism. So now I'm going to adhere this to the card base. So to make sure that I've got this centered, I'm going to mark my center point, which is 2 1/8 with a pencil. And then I'm going to take my T-square. I'm going to use this line actually in another part of the video. I'm just going to draw a straight line all the way across, and I'm going to erase that later, but it just helps me line all this up. So I'm going to take the point here and put it right where the center point is of my card base. And then I want to make sure the bottom is lined up with the center line that I drew with my T-square. You want to make sure it's pretty nice and snug toward that score line. So that's why I keep closing it to make sure it's as close as I can get it. Once I've got it centered, I'm going to take some Tombow Mono Multi Glue. You can see the hole is right here just to make sure you've got it on the right side. And I'm going to put a bunch of this glue not too close to the edge because you don't want it to seep out because it is tacky when it dries, but enough to kind of get it secured in there. And this is a really strong glue, so I'm just going to fold that. And then not too long, I'm going to flip this over and then open up my card again, and I'm going to do the same thing to the other side. So cover this with the Tombow glue and fold it down. I'm just going to hold it for a second because I want to open it up while my glue is still wet and open it all the way up and press it down. Because if my point was not completely centered on this card base, then my card isn't going to open all the way. But since I'm using liquid glue, I have some time to kind of move things around to make sure that I can open the card all the way without any problem. Next, I'm going to work on the panel that folds out into those 4 pieces. I have a piece of Neenah cardstock that's 3 3/4 by 10 3/4. So most of the measurements out there show this as 11 inches, but I used 10 3/4, which kind of changes my measurements a little bit. And I'll show you why I did this in a minute. So anyway, my midpoint is 5 3/8. And now I'm going to mark, I flipped it over, notice, because I want my folds to be in different directions. So I flipped it over, and now I'm measuring 2 11/16. I know it's kind of a very specific direction here, but 2 11/16 from the top and the bottom on both sides. This is where I need to score it. So my scoreboard does not go in 16ths, it's just 1/8, which is why I'm going to use this black line to score that 2 11/16 mark from each side. Okay, so now I'm going to fold this in half, and then I'm going to fold this in half, and then the same thing on the other side. So now you can see I had to divide 10 3/4 into 4 equal parts, and that's how I got down to the 1/16 of an inch. So I basically have just a W here. And I'm going to adhere this to my card base, but I'm going to make some pencil marks first. So I'm going to fold both sides inward, and I'm going to mark the midpoint. So remember, this is 3 3/4, so the midpoint is going to be 1 7/8. So I'm just going to mark 1 7/8 on this side, and then I'm going to flip it over, and I'm going to mark 1 7/8 on the other side. And this is going to help me line up my panel vertically and horizontally. So I'm going to grab my card base here, and I'm going to place my white piece right in the center. And I've got it still folded up in that W with the ends coming toward the middle. I'm going to line up the center with the center line that I drew, and then I'm going to line up these 1 7/8 points with the center score line of the mechanism. So I'm going to kind of measure on all 4 of these sides and just kind of keep moving it around until I get it centered perfectly. And then I'll grab my Tombow Mono multi-glue. I'm just going to glue the top right and the bottom left squares. Again, not getting too close to the edge. Now I'm going to be very careful. I'm just going to open up my Nina here and make sure that I keep that center part still. I don't want it moving at all. I'm just going to unfold it, and I held it down for about 10 seconds. And then I'm going to very carefully close my card for the first time. My glue is still a little bit wet, but I don't want to wait. So I'm just going to carefully close this up. And as you continue to open and close it, it gets a lot easier. Now you can see how nice and secure this white piece is inside my navy card base. So as I open it here, you can see it opens up, and you can use this vertically, or if you want to, you can actually use it horizontally by just decorating it differently so that it pops upward and you can have some landscape photos. I want to show you, remember I used 10 3/4 inch wide Nina instead of 11. The 11 inch is what I was getting off the web and some other sites. But if you use 11 inches, you can see that this pop-up hangs out the bottom of your card. And maybe that doesn't bother some people, but it bothered me enough to adjust the measurements. So now you can see I have that little bit, about 1/8 of an inch at the bottom, to protect my white so that you don't see it when you receive the card until you open it. Now I'm going to work on the front of my card. I have some smoky slate cardstock, which I'm going to cut the tall city out of, and then basic black cardstock. They're both Stampin' Up, and I'm going to cut the smaller one. So I'm going to take the smaller one and put some 2A glue on the back, and I'm going to line them up at the bottom, and I'm just sort of centering them here, but you can see how they kind of alternate black and gray, so you get a really nice landscape look here. I'm going to ink blend this background, and so I want to mark kind of around where I want my colors to start and end. I'm going to use Distress Oxide inks because I'm making about 30 of these cards, so I need an ink that's going to be really easy to blend, and these are always really easy to blend. So I'm just making sure that my Wilted Violet comes up just above the city line. And then I'll move on to Picked Raspberry. And the middle colors are kind of hard because you kind of want to start at the edge. But with the oxide inks, it's really not that hard to kind of start in the middle. So I'm starting a little bit in the Wilted Violet and moving up, as well as starting from the edge. And then finally I have Fossilized Amber, which I always thought was kind of a dark yellow, but it is really, really pretty yellow. And I'm just going to blend that to, and almost kind of fade it out at the top. So I just want a very light layer of this Fossilized Amber. And so I'm just making sure that it's going to look good, and then I'll put some ATG tape runner on the bottom where it's solid, and then fill in the rest with my 2A glue pen and just adhere this to the top. And then I will trim off the edges that are excess because this panel is 4 1/8 inch wide. This star die comes with a set, and I cut it out of some Daffodil Delight and covered it with some Wink of Stella Clear and put some 2A glue on the back and put it on the top there. And then just put some tape runner on the back and put it on the front of my card, my navy card base. So I have a little 1/16 of an inch mat all the way around this panel. And so that completes the front. Now what I'm going to do is work on those 4 panels on the inside. I just skipped over this. I used the same exact colors with the same exact technique, and I did the violet, raspberry, and amber all the way to the top and blended all these three together. Now this panel represents my two center panels on the inside of the card. So I'm going to stamp these two stamps with some VersaFine black onyx ink. I'm going to do them at the same time. Eventually I'm going to cut this in half so that I have two different panels. Now I had to do this twice. I'm going to ink it up twice. And notice that I could have done this before I did my ink blending, but I'm also going to do some white embossing, and I just find that it's easier to just do the embossing afterwards. But you have to let it dry because the oxide inks take a little while to dry. So I used some clear embossing powder over the black to make it shiny. And now this kind of star pattern comes with the stamp set. I'm going to use some Versamark ink with that and just randomly sort of twist it around so I get some really pretty stars that look random at the top. And I'll do that all the way at the top. I wanted to ground my images here, and so what I'm doing is I'm taking a Sharpie and I'm just going to draw all the way across, and this makes sure that it's even too across my two different panels. Now if you have a stamp that'll do this, so you can stamp it up with some black ink, that would work too, but I just thought it'd be just as easy to just draw it freehand with the Sharpie. And now all I have to do is cut it in half and I have my two panels. I resized my photos in Photoshop, and then I put the photos that were the correct size onto a 4x6 canvas, and that way I can just print them like a normal photo and cut them out. So what I'm going to do is take all four of these and put them on my quad panel here, and I'm just going to use a tape runner to do that. And you can see as I put them on that there is a 1/16 of an inch mat around each one of these. The exact measurements of the panels are 2 9/16 by 3 5/8. I forgot to erase those pencil lines, so I'm going to do that quickly. And then for my sentiment, I decided to do it on a separate piece of cardstock. So it's the same color as my card base, Night of Navy, and I'm going to heat emboss it with some white powder. And the reason why I did it on a separate piece of cardstock was because I didn't want to potentially warp the card base with the heat. And also, what if I messed it up after I spent so much time on the card? I really don't think anybody's going to care or notice, and so I decided to do it the easiest way possible. And that is my family holiday card for this year. So it is going to take me a while, but you know, I do this each year and I've whittled my list down to 30 people. So I keep getting less and less each year, but I really actually enjoy doing it. I usually make all of my cards over the Thanksgiving holiday just for something fun to do. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed that, and I will see you next time. Thanks for watching.